searching for areas away from London where John Smith's campaigning time can be usefully spent isn't that easy. Most of the winnable seats are already in Labour hands. So the only small threat to the leader's cheery outlook is the perception that next week's results may not appear to do justice to the party's opinion poll position, which suggests a strong surge in the southwest. Everywhere he goes, Mr Smith hammers home the message that it's the Tories who put up taxes. But here he's targeting his party's enthusiastic outposts. Labour-led councils such as Exeter are far removed from anything opponents can portray as loony left, in an area of traditional Liberal Democrat strength.
The Tories are dropping out. They're trailing as the third party. And of course there is competition between the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. But our campaign slogan throughout is, if you want to protest, of course you can vote Liberal Democrat, but if you want to replace the Tories, you've really got to vote Labour.
This is the most difficult campaign the Tories here can remember, local issues overshadowed by the government's unpopularity.
I do think that the Prime Minister, even though I admire him, I think he's an excellent Prime Minister, he's doing a wonderful job for the country, but I do think he's somewhere along the line, he's getting the wrong advice. His advisors are not quite there.
And the Liberal Democrats leader, campaigning in his own West Country constituency this morning, insists his party is the true opposition.
I think that what will happen across Britain is that you will see increasingly that the Liberal Democrats will be revealed as the challengers to the Tories, where they need to be beaten in their heartlands, and the challenges to Labour, where they're governing in the derelict inner cities that Labour has neglected and let down so badly for so long.
Some Tories in the southwest fear that in the European elections they could be completely wiped out by the Liberal Democrats. Politically, in the long term, that's an unappetising prospect for Labour too. In the short term then, Mr Smith has to remind voters that he, and not Mr Ashdown, is the alternative Prime Minister. Richard Bailey, BBC News, Exeter.
A series of reports in today's edition of the British Medical Journal suggests that the gap between the health of the rich and the poor is growing. One researcher found that while most people in Britain are living longer now, in some poorer areas death rates have gone up for the first time since the 1930s.
Looking at the very poorest areas in the northeast of England, researchers found that an overall improvement in British death rates has been masking the fact that among some of the poor, mortality rates actually increased in the last 10 years. Since the 1930s, the health of the poor has steadily improved, but now for some it appears to be plunging back downwards. Smoking and bad diet account for only 20% of the difference between the rich and the poor. Researchers blame psychological factors, such as the stress of unemployment, debt and depression, in other words, poverty itself.
We're not just talking about the effects of diet, of bad housing and so on, the absolute factors. We're talking about the emotional impact of poverty as well. That has important physical effects on people's health through cancers, heart disease and so on.
Britain has fallen down the international league table. In 1970, Sweden came top for life expectancy and Britain was 12th. By 1990, Japan had moved to the highest position while Britain had fallen to 17th. Health ministers today responding said the government's long-term aim of greater economic prosperity is the single most effective way of improving the wealth and health of the nation. However, today's report stresses that the wealth of a nation doesn't necessarily predict its health. The countries with the best mortality rates are those with the greatest equality in wealth, not necessarily those with the highest per capita income.
We've seen the numbers living in relative poverty growing, particularly in the last half of the 1980s. And you've also seen, and this matches closely with the finding about actual rise in death rates, we've also seen that the incomes of the poorest 10% of the population have actually fallen.
The journal finds the poor have different ailments. In Glasgow, poor children are twice as likely to need to have their tonsils taken out due to increased infections. Unemployment kills people, but mainly for psychological reasons. People become more vulnerable from the day redundancy is announced, rather than when their actual income falls. The government has set targets to deal with the causes of early death, but these reports say they're unlikely to succeed without greater economic equality. Polly Toynbee, BBC News.
The Ministry of Defence has been criticised by the National Audit Office for overspending by nearly £1 billion on weapons projects. The NAO, which monitors government spending, also says some parts of the weapons programme are several years behind schedule.
After an investigation into the 25 biggest military projects, including this new helicopter for the Navy, The National Audit Office has produced some of the strongest criticism of the Ministry of Defence for years. This helicopter alone is coming into service 5 years late and £170 million over budget. Even projects to modernise existing weapon systems like the Sea Harrier have run into trouble. The plane should have been upgraded after the Falklands War, and only now, 12 years on, is the work being completed. More costly is the plan to upgrade the Tornado bomber, where delays and changes have added £250 million to the bill. The report blames the MOD for underestimating the complexity of the modernisation and being over-optimistic about the cost and time involved, a criticism shared by other defence analysts as well.
They don't give sufficient credence to Murphy's Law. It's happened lots of times before. But remember that the MOD is under intense pressure to get best value for money. The contractors are under intense pressure to deliver as cheaply as possible. So everyone tends to be over-optimistic.
The new Trident missile system is highlighted in the report as a success. Its projected cost has fallen by nearly £3 billion. The exchange rate helped, but it is an exception. For the Defence Secretary Malcolm Rifkind, who's under pressure for cutting the armed forces, the accusation that better management could have saved nearly £1 billion is especially awkward because more cuts are expected soon. David Shookman, BBC News.
The Channel Tunnel will be officially opened by the Queen and President Mitterrand a week from today. And although the service will be limited to begin with, security plans are well advanced. Arrangements for evacuating passengers if there's an accident should get official approval this week.
The high-profile road checks by armed police are only part of a whole series of security measures. This being the Kent coast, the vans checked are more likely to be carrying cheap beer and wine than Semtex, but the police aren't taking chances. They know the sprawling tunnel site is a prestige terrorist target.
Of course, we've considered many scenarios, including attacks on the terminal site, attacks within the tunnel, other disasters. We've gone into a great deal of planning. We feel very well prepared in our planning processes.
One exercise is even said to have involved special forces being directed by a cabinet minister in Whitehall. But while a terror attack in the middle of the tunnel is the worst-case scenario, it's also regarded as highly unlikely. A bigger worry is the other major possible disaster, a fire on a train forcing the underground evacuation of 1,000 passengers. It shouldn't ever happen in real life because car shuttle compartments are designed to contain a fire long enough for trains to reach the surface. But like the police, British and French firefighters are planning for the worst. Yesterday, it was the French turn to take command. Kent's fire chief was taking orders from Calais. It was an example of what's become total cooperation.
You can never ask a fire officer who's going to be happy because he'll never say yes. What I will say is that we've done everything we can structurally. What we've got to do now is to make sure that the people who use the system keep it safe now and in the future.
The Anglo-French cooperation at Folkestone has created a novel legal situation. When you reach the border controls before driving onto the train, you're technically in France, and armed French customs and police can take anyone arrested through the tunnel to face French justice. Christopher Wayne, BBC News at the Channel Tunnel.
Liverpool supporters will stand on Anfield's Cop Terrace for the last time tomorrow. The Cop has become one of football's most famous landmarks, but after tomorrow's match against Norwich City, it will be closed down and converted into an all-seater stand. It's being changed to comply with the recommendations of the Taylor report, which followed the Hillsborough disaster.
For many, it's been an act of devotion. For everyone who stood on Liverpool's Spine Cop, it's been unforgettable. But after tomorrow, it's over. Named after a Boer War battlefield, but famous only once the Beatles and Bill Shankly had put Liverpool on the map, the Cop used to hold 28,000. Passion, knowledge and wit in a swaying, heaving mass.
I've seen them fighting at the top and to be handed down on the right down to the bottom.
Were you ever passed down like that?
No, no, no. I didn't want to miss the game.
The Cop, it was said, used to suck the ball into the opposition's net and did it for 3 decades of dominance from the early 60s to the late 80s. But the Hillsborough disaster ended 96 lives and with it the big club's terracing. Lord Justice Taylor reported that seats would help avoid danger. The deadline is in August. And this is the replacement. £8 million worth of seats for 12,000 fans who'll be asked to pay more than the current £8. In Liverpool especially, it's a sensitive issue.
Well, it's got to be a slightly more expensive, of course it does, because, I mean, the facilities that we're going to generate in here are going to be fantastic.
Preparatory work on a family-orientated stand that will still be Anfield's cheapest has already begun prior to next week's demolition. Like the Berlin Wall, chunks of the Kop will be available as souvenirs, but there the similarity ends. In Germany there was jubilation, here there's more a sense of loss. Rob Bonnet, BBC News in Liverpool.
The Eurovision Song Contest tomorrow night will welcome one singer whose country is hoping she won't win. Russia is entering the competition for the first time, but would have to host next year's contest if its entry this year is successful, an expensive prize. The Russian contestant is called Yudif, and she cites the unlikely combination of Jimi Hendrix and Whitney Houston as her main influences.
There's been fierce competition to become Russia's very first Eurovision entry. After all, during the long years of Soviet communism, taking part in the song contest would have been inconceivable. Russia may not have a hope of winning tomorrow, but as a proud superpower, it wouldn't want either to suffer the sort of Euro humiliation normally reserved for Norway. It was at this televised contest that the Russians chose their belated entry into Europe. Some candidates decided simply to imitate famous hits like ABBA's Money, Money, Money. The song had to be disqualified, but in the end a young woman called Yudif was selected. Though the economic crisis here means the Russian organisers haven't got enough money to pay her airfare to Dublin. She's had to find a sponsor instead. And while she's busy making a video of her song, the Russian government are terrified it might actually win tomorrow. If it does, Moscow will have to stage next year's contest, something the Russians just couldn't afford to do.
If Russia suddenly wins the contest, which I don't think will happen, but still, well, of course, there's, a weird slim chance, then I think it will be absolutely catastrophic.
So, while Yudif and her people may be praying for victory, her government are certainly not. Ben Brown, BBC News, Moscow.
That's it this Friday lunchtime from the 1 o'clock news. Good afternoon.
BBC CFAX will be carrying a comprehensive coverage of the South African election. Full details can be found on pages 151 to 159.
Good afternoon. Plenty of fine, bright weather to come this holiday weekend. Not quite as warm as it is today, perhaps. Temperatures today in eastern England 21 or 22 degrees, but even so, very pleasant indeed with plenty of sunshine coming along. By Monday, a little bit of rain moving eastwards across the country. That should clear away into the North Sea by lunchtime. Well, there's the chart at the moment. We've got these warm southerly winds across most parts, but this chap here is giving some rain up in northwestern parts. That'll clear away southwards during tomorrow morning as a very weak feature indeed. High pressure then building once again as we go through Saturday and Sunday. Today's temperatures then looking like this: 19 to 22 across many central and eastern parts of the country, 15 perhaps in Northern Ireland, and 16 degrees up in northeastern Scotland. But there is some rain on the chart as well. You can see that across those northwestern parts. It's now coming back into Northern Ireland as well. But the wettest weather this morning has been up in the Highland region at Alt Bay, 13 millimetres in 6 hours, and that's approximately ½ an inch of rain. Well, that rain will gradually move southeastwards in the next 6 or 7 hours. It'll brighten up for a short time though, perhaps in County Down up into some other western parts of Scotland, but the best of the sunshine will be further south. That's where the highest temperatures are going to be. Now later in the afternoon, early evening, 1 or 2 showers then breaking out across northern England and southeastern Scotland, which could be fairly sharp, but that rain band breaking up in the northwest before the day is out. And then tonight, a band of cloud and a little rain moving southwards across many of the central parts of the country. Some places will stay dry. I think most of the rain and drizzle will be on these western coasts and hills, and clearer weather following behind to much of northern Britain. It'll turn fresher though tonight. Temperatures about 6 or 7 degrees across the northern half of the country, but a bit sticky in the southeast. I think 10 or 12 degrees, making it really quite a warm night indeed. Saturday though, starting off fairly cloudy in the south, not much sunshine around. I think most places again dry, just some spots of rain and some mist around those southwestern coasts. But then all parts brightening up, plenty of sunshine to come during the afternoon, A significant drop in temperature for eastern Britain, about 17 or 18 degrees here, but not much wind, and with all that sunshine, it should be a smashing day, all in all. And that's it from me.
Congratulations. Tomorrow night, don't miss the magic of Eurovision.
I won the world, no one happy as can be. Waterloo, I was defeated, you won the war. But if you want to see some more, and then you can show that you think you know, you're making your mind up.
Will Britain's Francis Raffel enter the Eurovision Hall of Fame? Join the celebration tomorrow at 8 on BBC One and Radio 2.
The European challenge continues in 20 minutes in Going for Gold. First on BBC One, a family crisis for Helen.